and welcome to the Daily Dose. We are in the middle of a series that we've called Be Human. Now, if COVID has taught us anything, it's that life is fragile. It's short and it's complicated and it's frustrating and it's messy and confusing and joyful and all of that all mixed up together. So these couple of weeks we've been talking about what it means to be human. And today I want to talk to you about something called intentional proximity. I know it's a crazy term. I hadn't even heard about it until a friend told me about it recently. It's basically about being intentional about showing up in other people's lives. My friend Erica, she's like really super good at this. When my mom was sick with cancer, my mom had to be life flighted from Des Moines, Iowa to Mayo Clinic. And from there, she was put into a coma. I spent the first couple of nights with her up in Rochester at Mayo, staying with her. But then I had to come home because I still had 4 kids at home to take care of. It was just this really tough, complicated time in my life. And Skylar, my youngest, she was only 5 years old at the time. And so even in my exhaustion, there was a Tuesday night where I had to make sure that Skylar got to her swimming lessons. So I went and brought Sky to her swimming lessons over at the YMCA. And I was sitting there watching Skylar kick and swim and paddle with her teacher. All of a sudden, my friend Erica showed up at the swimming lessons with 2 cups of coffee. And she handed me one of those coffees. And I looked at her and I was a little bit confused. And I said, "Hey, do your girls have swimming lessons at this time? Or have you just finished working out?" And she looked at me and she said, "No, silly, I'm here for you. I know that you have swimming lessons with Skylar on Tuesdays, and I can't imagine how hard things are for you right now." And it took me back. It took me a bit to process this, that she showed up right there in the place that she knew where I would be just for me. Erica showed up and she knew that she'd be there. And then she spent just the next 30 minutes while we were watching swimming, and I was just crying and processing all of these things that it meant to have my mom in a coma in the other state. And this is what we mean by intentional proximity. She was intentional, and she knew that I needed something. She didn't ask, she just showed up in my space. And again, after my mom died, the doorbell rang and I was a disaster, but Erica showed up once again with 2 cups of coffee, of course. So what would it mean for us to live in intentional proximity? We know our friends and our neighbors. We know that they have stuff going on. Some of them we know because we've had some short conversations with about them, maybe a text message, or maybe we know that they have stuff going on because of Facebook or something like that. That they have hurts and hang-ups and pains and problems, and we're so often worried about whether or not we would want to show up for them. We don't want to be intrusive. We don't want to be nosy. We've been socialized in our cultures to just kind of stay out of it. Let their problems be their problems, and let our problems be our problems. But let's be honest today. This is not at all what Jesus did. Jesus showed up in their space. I mean, think about Zacchaeus for a second, the tax collector who everyone hated, but just wanted to see Jesus. So Zacchaeus, he climbs up this great big tree just to check him out. And then Jesus didn't look up there and say, "Hey, Zacchaeus, would it be all right if I came over to your house today? Could you call your wife and make sure that she's got time for me to show up?" Instead, Jesus looks at Zacchaeus and says, "Hey, I'm going to your house today." Jesus just showed up with intentional proximity to care for Zacchaeus, to be in his space and present with him. Or there's this other funny story in the book of John, chapter 1, where some of John the Baptist's followers are kind of lurking after Jesus, kind of like paparazzi. And this is what the Bible says. The Bible says that they followed Jesus, and then Jesus turned around and saw them following and asked them, "What do you want?" I love that so much. And these guys, they're kind of taken aback in the Bible, and they just blurt out, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" It's almost like they didn't even have time to sort of think or process it. So they blurted out, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" Because they've been following him and they got caught in that act. And then Jesus says, "Well, come and you will see." And then they went to where he saw that Jesus was staying, and then they stayed that whole day with him. Intentional proximity. Jesus invites them in and spends the day with them. Jesus shows up for lepers and tax collectors, adulterers, outsiders, foreigners, fishermen, prostitutes, and then he hangs out with them. He hangs out with them in their space, and he gets real close. So I want to wonder with you today, what if we just started showing up? I mean, we know that those people, it might be a little weird for a moment. It might have a hint of slight awkwardness, but the love and kindness, I think, of showing up, that would overwhelm any weird and take over any awkwardness. Sometimes the people in our own home, they actually need us to show up too. For many of our families, we've fallen into these rhythms where we're just kind of doing our own thing, even if we're in the same house. But what if we just decided to be in intentional proximity with them, to just show up in their space and care for them? So here's my question for you. Who can you show up for today? A friend, a neighbor, someone you know who's just going through a tough time? Your spouse? Your kids? Let's take a cue from Jesus, and let's just show up and be there with intentional proximity. Thanks so much for joining me today here as we're unpacking what it means to be human, and let's just be better humans together. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, I want to invite you to share and subscribe. I'm super honored that you're here.